been a bit. Kind of hit a bit of a creative wall, but what can you do? Before we begin the video, however, let me hold your attention with my new Patreon. Technically I already had one, but I was not very active on there. To those of you who don't know, Patreon is a site where you can donate to your favorite content creators. Now I don't want to pressure you to go and donate, but I do want you to know that any and all donations you provide will go directly into this channel and help it grow. That could be from doing RC car reviews to traveling to and covering different RC race events outside of my home state of Georgia. Thank you for bearing with me, and let's get on with the setup tips. Now I already made a video on the absolute basics when it came to setup changes like what ride height, camber, and shock setups do, but I left out a lot of smaller things that, to be honest, I had very little understanding of before. Over time, that has changed. I'm still not exactly roar race ready, but I can handle getting my car well set up enough for most tracks. Or at the very least, I know what does what on a smaller scale. Let's begin with the largest thing I left out: weight distribution. You see, it's quite simple. The more weight you put on a certain part of your car, the more traction it's going to have. The general rule is the more traction your track has, the more weight to the front you're going to want. This is especially true when your front tires look like this. This is also why the carpet version of the B6.3 comes with steel chassis weights under the servo and the ESC, and the dirt version, to my knowledge, does not. This extends to the battery placement as well. The further forward you place your battery, the more steering you're going to have. The further back you move your battery, the more rear grip you're going to have. However, depending on your transmission, you can only move your battery back so far, and that brings us to said transmission setups. There are a few different types of transmissions you can get in a two-wheel drive, well, anything, so let's go over a few. These days, the most common transmission you're going to find is going to be a lay-down transmission. Lay-down transmissions are set up to have the trans gears be as low as possible, because they are used for high and very high traction conditions. Next to them are layback transmissions. They are designed to put more weight towards the rear compared to, say, a laydown transmission. These are suited better for medium traction situations. They tend to be an option for some kits out there like that T6.2 I have. Next up, we have stand-up transmissions. These are made almost exclusively for low grip conditions. Stand-up transmissions allow you to put both the battery and motor as far back as possible. Like I said, this transmission is only really recommended for really loose tracks. On high grip conditions, which in this day and age is mostly everywhere, you want to have your center of gravity as low as possible. And that leads us to diff height. Diff height is simply to get the axles to be level, so it goes something like this. The higher your ride height, the lower your diff height must be. The lower your ride height, the higher your diff height must be. All simply to keep the axles level. As for the diffs themselves, they have their own tuning and characteristics. Most people already know to run a gear diff on carpet in Astro and a ball diff on dirt. It's the tuning within that gets a little bit confusing. Having a tighter differential will cause you to have more on-power steering, less off-power steering, and less traction exiting a quarter, but more traction in the corner overall. Whereas a looser diff will cause you to have more traction exiting a corner, less on-power steering, but less traction in a corner overall. Generally, having a looser diff is much easier to drive most of the time. You'll have to tune it depending on the grip levels. There's no real clean way to segue into this, so let's get started. The rear C and D block, these things, hold these things we like to call pills. These pills hold the rear hinge pins in place and allow you to adjust a bunch of things. The obvious being your rear toe in. I've already gone over toe in and toe out on the other video, but I'll go over it quickly. Rear toe in causes the car to act more stable, and rear toe out is never used, period. Another thing that these rear pills are used for is adjusting your kick-up. Having more kick-up allows you to handle bumps better, will give you better on-power steering, whereas less kick-up will give you tighter steering, but you will not be able to handle bumps as well. Every car has a different C and D block pill system, so be sure to check your manual to check how to actually set it up. Another small thing to go over would be these little pills on the rear hubs of the car. The general rule for these is the lower grip you have, the higher you want these pills to be. whereas the higher grip you have, the lower you want the pills to be. Or at the very least, that's how it was for pretty much every setup sheet I could find. Lastly, let's go over some things that don't really fall into any specific categories. Having a longer chassis will cause your car to feel more stable, whereas a shorter one will cause it to feel more agile. Having a more flexible chassis will give you more lateral grip but less consistent handling, whereas having a stiffer chassis will give you less lateral grip but more consistent handling. Having more droop will give you a slower steering response but will allow you to handle both jumps and bumps better, whereas having less droop will give you faster steering response but jumps and bumps will be a bit more sketchy. Those are all of the setup tips I can give you at this point in time. Now I know there's one setup change that I'm ignoring that's extremely important, but I'd like to say that for a video on its own. Also, I still don't fully understand it, so yeah. If you liked the video and got something out of it, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you later.